If you're launching a podcast or you're rethinking about your strategy for it, one of the questions that may come up is, okay, should I do guest or solo episodes, and which one is better for your business? And today I'm going to go over the pros and the cons of each, and also what's a happy medium in the middle if you can't decide. So, what are the pros and the cons of guest episodes or guest interviews? So some of the pros are you might be able to leverage their audience. So if your guest shares the episode, you get to be exposed to their audience and to new listeners. The next thing is the conversation. So the conversations are, if like, they're going to be amazing, especially if you're bringing on amazing guests. The content's going to be amazing, hands down. The third thing is it's less content pressure. So, you don't have to do research and figure out sort of like the whole script for the whole podcast. You just need to bring yourself, your personality, and maybe research a few good questions for your guests. And, that's all you have to worry about for guest episodes. And then the networking opportunities. So, the guest that's coming on, that's one more person that you have sort of like a nice relationship with than you probably wouldn't have had before. So a lot of people actually use their guest episodes and their guest interviews to network with other people. So, that's another thing to think about too. Now, what are the cons for guest episodes? So, some of the cons are, coordinating with other people's schedules can be kind of time consuming. So, you trying to coordinate times with someone else. Also, what if they what if they cancel? Then you're gonna have to reschedule that, and then what are you gonna do that week for your episode? If you're not recording in advance, so a lot of scheduling issues can come up when you're doing sort of like guest episodes. The next thing is less brand authority. So with you bringing in all these amazing guests, basically which you're highlighting your guests in your episode. So if you're like a business owner and you're selling services and courses and products like that, your guest is getting all the spotlight. So you're still going to be seen as a thought leader, but you're really highlighting your guest. So your audience is probably most likely going to want to go see what your guest has to offer instead of going to sort of like your products and services. And not to say that they won't go to your website and check you out as well, but it's just, since you're highlighting your guests, you're kind of like sharing traffic, if that makes sense. The next thing is editing may take longer. So with 2 guests, you have 2 tracks that you have to edit, possibly 2 videos that you have to edit. So there might be more editing needed with the multiple speakers. And then the last con is, there's less control over the content. The conversation might not go as planned as always, and, it might not always align with your brand. What exactly do you do in that situation? Do you edit out the parts that you don't like, or do you just schedule a new episode, or, do you not post it that week, or, so those are some of the cons that you get with sort of like guest episodes or guest interviews for your podcast. So what are the pros for solo episodes? So with solo episodes, you have full control of your content. You set the tone, the pace, and the messaging for it. There is stronger brand authority there because, there's not a guest that you have to share the spotlight with. So your audience, they're looking directly at you. They're looking at you for the information. And with that, also, you also gain a deeper relationship with them, which is actually number 5. And they're looking up to you. You also have more monetization control, so it's easier to sort of like integrate your offers into the sort of like podcast episode without it being awkward, and it's easier to integrate brand partnerships in there as well because you don't have to sort of like think about what the guest is going to think of your promotions. And then also it's easier production, of course, because you don't have to work around anybody else's schedule. It's just your schedule, so you just record the episodes and get them out whenever you need to. Okay, so now with the cons of doing solo content, number one, it's more pressure to carry the episode technically. So you have to keep the energy high. You do have to deliver on the content, because if you're just saying a bunch of stuff that doesn't make sense, then you're not going to be able to sort of like keep that loyal audience. And yeah, you have to stay engaged. And yeah, you might have to be a little bit more engaged. I'm not saying you have to have an over the top personality, but you definitely want to avoid sounding monotone since there's no guests to bounce ideas off of. The second thing is it's harder to attract new audience, so literally all the promotion is up to you. Number three, it requires more content planning, so you need to actually research and script or outline your episodes to stay on track. Whereas with guests, you can come up with questions and the conversations might flow a little bit more naturally. And then three, less social proof and less networking. But, of course, there's other ways to go about that. You don't have to do that on a podcast, but it might take a little while for your sort of like credibility to be boosted through a podcast. So, what is the happy middle for business owners? So, number one, I'm going to say using your podcast specifically as a networking tool. So, like, for example, if you're sending somebody a message and you're just like wanting to do a coffee chat and they don't know you, they're less inclined to sort of like want to hop on that call with you because they think you're going to sell something to them. But if you're like, hey, I really love what you're doing, I love what I'm seeing, could you come on my podcast and, share with my viewers what you do, they're more inclined to sort of like hop on the call with you and do the podcast. And then you can sort of like, maybe talk to them a little before or a little after about what you do. And then, boom, somebody else knows about what you do. And then the second thing that you could do is you could actually coach your guests on your podcast. So if you coach your guests on your podcast, that sort of like removes the, part where if someone else comes on, they're sort of like taking the spotlight away from your services and products. And it's like the guest is still going to be highlighted on that episode, but what's really being highlighted is your coaching skills and how knowledgeable you are. So it's both a win-win for you and the person, because they're getting visibility on what they do, and you're also getting sort of like industry leader points because you're coaching them. So I hope this makes sense. I'm definitely testing out this new sort of way of like creating content where I like share my whiteboard screen and do mini presentations on things. So let me know, how do you like this style of content? Also, definitely check out my previous episodes where I talk about the differences between traditional podcasts and YouTube podcasts, and then also how to promote your podcast. And yeah, thank you for watching. If you need help with editing your podcast, then click the link down below in my description box, and